What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to a brand new episode of Leveling Up with JCwithTHeshot. We are now in week 3, level 3 to be precise, and I was debating on doing this if I wanted to do an episode this week or not with everything that's going on in the world, but we're going to spend a little bit of time talking about that towards the end of the episode. But I do have a very special guest with me this week. Again, if you watched last week's episode, you all know that we had Bear Claw on. Also known as Franklin, Wake Up Frank on all socials. This week we have another one of my very, very good friends who we've been friends for quite a long time at this point. And so I want to bring him in and we will get this conversation going. Hey, what's up, Robbie?
How's it going?
Going, how about you?
I am hanging in there.
I feel that. So obviously you've been...
state of hanging in there.
What'd you say?
It's a perpetual state of hanging in there.
Yeah, I feel that. So obviously you've watched all the other episodes, so you've kind of seen what this has been about, what this story has been about. And so obviously, you know, kind of where we're at. I just want you to kind of introduce who you are. Like, who are you as a person? Who are you as a gamer? Then we'll kind of go a little bit further in after that.
Sure. So who I am as a person, I am an educator in Indiana right now. So I'm actually getting ready to move from one institution of higher education to another, and that's really where my profession is. That's where my career is. I'm a writer. I've been a writer for 12 or so years since 11th grade. Weird to think that that's been 12 years ago. And I am, I'm just trying to be involved in as much as I can right now. That's sort of where I'm at in life. I'm about to be 30 in not too long from now. So my quarter life crisis is a little bit overdue, but it's getting ready to happen. And then in terms of being a gamer, I've been playing video games since I had a Super Nintendo when I was a kid. It's been a long time. But I play all kinds of games. I really started playing video games, like playing Super Mario on the Super Nintendo, and then Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles on the Game Boy.
Wow, okay.
Yeah, so I started there, and then really throughout my childhood and into my teen years, I started playing the sports games. I mean, I can remember staying up really late with my dad playing Madden 04 and even playing Nintendo 64 before that. And that led into PlayStation and PlayStation 2, PlayStation 3, PlayStation 4, and now PC. So I've sort of been leveling up myself while still holding those memories close of the previous systems.
I like what you did there. I liked you throwing in the podcast title in there. So before we, I do want to come back to kind of your storyline before we go any further with that. So I've got your IGN above your webcam, as you saw probably last week with Franklin's. Yeah. So Shifty Powers 91. What's the story behind that? Because that's been something that hasn't been around long.
Right. It's very recent. I feel like in the last 6 months I changed it. So on most, if not all of my social media, my handle has always been RF Williford. So my first initial, my middle initial, my last name. But then I have friends that have been streaming, and you know, I can name a couple if you'd like. But what I realized is, if I'm using that, then anybody, anywhere, if they're watching your stream, they can see my name, basically. So as like a little bit of a privacy shifty, I decided to pick a different name, and the name Shifty Powers is actually the name of a soldier from World War II, who, if you've ever seen the show, came out a long time ago, Band of Brothers.
Yep.
Shifty Powers was one of the sort of expert riflemen.
Okay.
And I just really liked him as a character. He's sort of quiet and He doesn't say much, and he really focuses on his craft. Like he really focuses on
Mm.
being the best at what he does. And I think that for me, that's something that's like, as a gamer, and I think I told you this a while back. Like I try not to go from game to game because I want to be better in every game that I play.
Hmm.
So I focus my time on it and my energy on it, and that's sort of what he did. And plus, I just kind of liked the name Shifty Powers. And the 91's the year that I was born. So
Okay.
yeah, that's sort of the abridged version.
See, that's funny because similar to last week when Frank was explaining his, I think that when you changed your name, like the joke was the reason that you changed it was because that our other friend Derek, whose name is Lifty Powers, you changed it just to be similar to his but different. So I don't know that I've ever actually heard the full story of why you changed it. That's
Yeah.
that's really interesting, and I think knowing that like it suits the way that you play your games and the way that you approach each game that you play a little bit more. Like I understand, and I'm able to correlate that a little bit more into your play style too, which is
Yeah.
almost crazy to think about.
Yeah. That makes sense.
Because I think too, the reason that I've asked this question the last couple of weeks is because I think it's important to understand why people almost have this separate alias, right? Like there's another identity that comes with your name that you play with online, right? Like you look at people like Ninja, you look at people like Tim. I'm not gonna use Tim the Tat Man because that's kind of just like his name is Tim and he's got a bunch of tattoos, so like that's not a very good name. Loved Tim the Tat Man, but regardless. But you look at like Myth, you look at Courage, like all these people who have this like separate alias to who they are, like in real life. And if you come across one of them in game, and I think back to early highlights of Ninja playing, like his name used to be Ninja's Hyper, and he was like you watched any game of his,
Yeah.
but that was a name that you feared. Like you feared running into Ninja into any game that you played with.
Absolutely.
And so it's almost like an alter ego, and you go into these different worlds and these different fantasy lands, and you have a completely different person. I wouldn't say personality, but you could if you really wanted to, right?
Well, yeah, and it's it's interesting. Like when I was thinking of changing my name, I was thinking of it as like, well, what would I change it to? Like, I don't want just some name. Like, I don't want to
Right.
just go into a name generator and be like, oh, that sounds cool. I wanted to have some character behind it.
Mhm.
And I took that literal. Like, I literally picked a character. But the other part of that story is that when I was younger, I actually did play PC games when I was younger. I
Mm.
had a friend of mine who built me a computer
Oh,
when I
wow.
was in high school. It wasn't anything flashy, nothing
Right.
like it is now. And the only game I played was Call of Duty.
Okay.
But him and I played. It was Call of Duty United Offensive, and we played
Throwback.
online together. And it's a big throwback, yeah. And he would pick an actual character name from the movie, and I don't even remember what my screen name was. It
Mm.
wasn't R.F. Williford, but that was sort of like a piece of an inspiration because he picked the person that he picked because he admired that person in that character in the show
Mhm.
in the story. And that's so I was thinking like, oh, I need to stay true to that. Like I want to pick a character that maybe exemplifies me a little bit without appropriating or you know um, like causing harm in any way by
Right.
picking a name. So yeah, and I also want to say for the record, Lifty Powers picked his name after I picked Shifty
Oh,
Powers.
okay. Okay. So
So,
for the record.
for the record, let the record show Lifty came after Shifty.
Okay.
And it started as a joke. And then, I mean, we know Lifty, he loves his
Weights.
fitness and his weight. So it makes sense that he's Lifty Powers.
Right.
But yeah, that's sort of the thing. You're right. Like you take sort of a persona
Mhm.
and you can take a whole different persona but still have roots to yourself, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I think about like there have been 3 times that I've changed my my gamer name. in my life, and they've all kind of correlated to where I'm at that point in life. It's weird because when I first started, and I haven't told many people about this, but when I first started playing Xbox with Halo, more specifically with Halo 2, my name was Coxima. And the reason that it was is because when I was in school, like in any sports, like I had friends that nicknamed Coxie, obviously going off of my last name, and then it just kind of transformed into that. And then I got a lot of heat playing online. People were like, "That sounds like an STD," and I was like, "Great, love that." So then fast forward to college, right? Like my name transformed into Frat Boy 72.
The infamous.
part of a fraternity, and I was like, I got nothing else. This sounds kind of cool. And then that all quickly changed. And then I think it's only been a couple years, I mean, since I started streaming, that I really transformed into JCwithTHEshot.
Right.
And I think this has been the most prevalent name that I've had, I think, and it's something I think is going to stay, hopefully, for the future. But it's weird to see how that you kind of mentioned, like had a different name, like when you played Call of Duty, and then it transformed into RF Williford that you held for so long, and then things in life shifted, and here you are. The shifty powers.
Yeah.
It's crazy. Like there's so much importance to a name. Obviously you're gonna get people that get their random like Xbox name generated, but
Of course. Yeah, and you're right. And when you say there's so much to a name, like there's stories behind that,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like when you said it yourself, Ninja, Myth, right? These people, when people hear their name, they hear also the story that comes with it,
Right.
right? And I'm not big into the streamers, so you know a lot more about that than I do. But when I hear the name Ninja, I know what I know about Ninja because
Mm-hmm.
of his name and what
Right.
that represents. So absolutely.
So to kind of switch tracks here, one of the things that I asked Franklin last week, and what I talked about kind of in the first episode, right, is you already shared a little bit about your background, right, and your gaming timeline as a gamer, but thinking about kind of along that timeline from when you first picked up Super Mario to now, we're playing a plethora of different games together. What would you say have kind of been like the three like milestones or three most important gaming experiences that you've had along that timeline? Like things that stick out to you the most that you're like, okay, I think of that game, this is exactly where I'm transported to.
That is a really good question. And I know that I've heard the question before, but I don't know if I've considered it for myself. So the very first thing, like I mentioned earlier, the very first thing that I remember is getting my Game Boy
Mm-hmm.
from my mom and getting the Ninja Turtle game. It's funny because I remember, I think it was my birthday, and I don't remember how old I was. I was much younger. It was the very first model of the Game Boy. And I remember my mom saying, "I have something for you." And we went to the kitchen, and I'm thinking to myself, like, oh, it's going to be a snack. Like it's going to be something that I enjoy, a snack that I really
Right.
enjoy. And then she opens one of the cupboards and reaches up. She gets on her tippy toes. She reaches up on the top shelf and she pulls this Game Boy down. And I'm thinking to myself, like, what the heck? Why are you hiding a Game Boy in here? Like this is an odd place, but she knew
Yeah.
I wouldn't look there. She
Right.
knew I wouldn't look there. Um, and I remember her handing it to me and me like literally holding it in my hand and being like, wow, like this is mine. This is um my first system,
Yeah.
right? Gaming system. Now the Super Nintendo came before that, but I don't remember. I remember my grandmother getting it for me, but I don't
Mm.
remember like the exact day or what I was doing or if it
Yeah.
was Christmas or whatever. But to get a Game Boy, I think was transformational for me because it was something that I owned, something that I could have,
Mm-hmm.
and I had friends who all had Game Boys, but I didn't. So that was like the very first thing, and it was Ninja Turtles, um, because I loved the Ninja Turtles
Yeah.
when I was a kid. I would say the second one, the second memory or game that I can think of is Zelda Ocarina of Time.
Oh, great choice.
This is one of my favorite, if not my favorite game of all time. The first time I remember when I hear the name, the first thing that I think of is when I went to my cousin's house, who we don't visit very often,
Mm-hmm.
and he was playing it. And I remember it because the cartridge was gold.
Yep.
So for the folks that don't know, for Nintendo 64 games, traditionally the cartridges are gray. Some of them are black,
Mm-hmm.
but there's not a whole lot that are outside of that.
Right.
And so I remember looking at the Nintendo 64 and seeing the cartridge and it being gold and me being like, this is so cool. Like, I want to know about this game.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's a story-based game, which is like down my alley. I love stories.
Mm-hmm.
So I remember playing it and I remember asking him if I could borrow it. And he said yes, so he let me borrow it. And I remember just when I got home, I don't even remember what time it was, but playing that game until all hours of the night, pretending I was asleep when my mom came in the room, and then when she left, getting back on the game. I was a funny kid. Like I would sit and try to play every side mission, every
Oh yeah.
try to get every heart from the game and that sort of thing. And then playing that with my best friend Derek, who he's good at. Back then, he was good at every game that he played.
Hmm.
So that I would say is the second one. And then the third one, which I think started me like getting back into gaming, because for a period of time I didn't, other than Madden, I didn't really play a ton of other
Right.
games. The third one was when I started playing SOCOM with
Okay.
my buddy Reckless. His name is his screen name is Reckless. And I remember after, so we played baseball together in middle school and high school. And I remember after practice, I would go over to his house, and we would just play. And uh, he is good at every game he plays.
Yeah, he is.
Like within hours, he has strategy down. He's thinking of ways he can be better. He's talking through it. He's just good at everything. And I remember sitting and playing that game with him, and him like giving me the game and letting me play it. That was my first, like, remembering my first time playing online, and I think
Hmm.
that's what piqued my interest, because I had never played online really before
Mm-hmm.
that much. So I would say that's my third one. I've got others, but that when I think of SOCOM, I think of playing with Reckless, listening to music, and just like learning the
Mm-hmm.
game.
Yeah, and I think about SOCOM too. Like SOCOM for me, like I hopped late on the SOCOM train, but SOCOM is one of those games is one of the very first games that I can remember there being professional at like gamers for that, and there actually being competition. Like
Yep.
that is the first memory that I have of like competitive gaming is
Right.
that game. 'Cause
Mhm.
there's so much to it. It's not just running and gunning like Call of
Right.
Duty. Like there's strategy to it. Um,
Right.
so obviously, you said you had more, and you've kind of seen, and even still to this day, I know that you enjoy story based games. We've talked about this a little bit, and obviously with Last of Us 2 coming out here in a couple of weeks, big game for both of us. We love the first one,
Yeah.
phenomenal story, and we've talked about that a little bit. But at this point in your life, you made the joke that you're one day closer to 30, and I made that joke with you the other day. But like, what keeps you gaming? Like, what is it about gaming to this day that keeps you being a part of that culture almost?
Yeah, it's almost exclusively playing with friends at this point. I don't remember when it shifted from following the stories to playing with my friends.
Hmm.
If I had to guess, it was somewhere around the time I moved to Indiana 4 years ago, because that's when I got my PlayStation 4.
Mm-hmm.
All through grad school, I didn't have a TV. I didn't have a gaming system to play. So I had a PlayStation 3, but I didn't play it. I didn't have a TV
Right.
to play it on. So I think maybe over that time, what was happening in my life was I was starting to focus more on the relationships,
Mm-hmm.
and it was my first time being away from what I knew.
Mm-hmm.
Right, moving to Akron from Oakland, I was away from all my friends, all my family. I didn't know anybody there. And then after 2 years in Akron, I moved here to Muncie, and I'm about to move again. And I remember getting the PlayStation and thinking, this is a good way to connect with all the people that, one, play games, and two, that are in all different states
Hmm.
and time zones. So now, today, I mean, I play with people, play with you, I play
Hmm.
with Bear Claw, I play with others that everybody's in a different state than I am, and it's a way for us to connect, to continually connect. And perhaps that's the story in and of itself.
Mm.
Perhaps it's me building on the stories of my friendships
Mm.
that keeps me going, if that makes sense.
I like that. Yeah, I think it's important. And I think that's something, obviously, Franklin mentioned last week. A lot of it's about connection, and we have met a lot of people through gaming.
Yeah.
Like, I think about everybody that we play with, even if it's every once in a while, like we have met a lot of people
Yep.
through gaming, and it's just become one of those things that sparks connection between people, and it doesn't matter who that person is. Like, if you're finding connection online, like you're developing a relationship, like you're playing with them constantly. Doesn't matter where they live. It's just something that almost becomes natural. Like, they just form into that group. Um,
Absolutely.
and so kind of thinking about that, right? Like, and you know, thinking about kind of where the world is at currently, in a lot of different ways. Like, where do you think gaming falls into culture? I know that's kind of a broad question, but like, and this could be a topic that we talk about forever. And I would love to have you back on and do an episode where we talk about this in more depth. But like,
Yeah.
briefly, like, where do you think gaming falls into culture?
Such a good question. I think there, especially in the last, I I would say 2 years, there's been a huge rise in esports.
Hmm.
At So speaking in my own wheelhouse in higher ed, institutions are starting to form esports teams. Some schools are offering scholarships, right, for folks to join their esports teams, and so I see it starting to grow because people are finding a community in it, like you mentioned. In higher ed, we talk a lot about, at least in the work that I've been doing, we talk a lot about sense of belonging
Hmm.
and ways in which we can help students when they come here to campus. We can help them feel like they belong here.
Yeah.
It's going to be different for everybody. What I'm interested in is different than what you're interested in, and so on and so forth. So, the way I see it fitting into higher ed culture is it's giving students, who are from very different backgrounds, the opportunity to make friends and compete together and really start, like, have a good time, like have
Mm.
fun. And then on a broader scale, I think it fits into like pop culture, because more and more we're seeing some of the names that you mentioned, um, that are taking stands on big issues. And I
Hmm.
think about the things that are happening right now in the world, and seeing, um, some of these big time people with big platforms, um, that are giving money, that are speaking out, that are willing to, at times, disagree with their viewers,
Hmm.
but to take a stand on things that matter, like the Black Lives Matter movement, or even the Me Too movement. I've seen Jordan Fisher take stands on multiple of these issues. So I think that it fits in that way, and I think we're only going to see it continue to grow, because it gives people across time frame, or time zones, and state lines. It gives people an opportunity to continue to connect and talk about these issues, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And like I said, I would love to have a deeper conversation on that, because I think that gaming is leads to culture in so many different ways. And I think
Right.
of, um, there's a a series on Disney Plus with, oh my gosh, what's his name, Jeff Goldblum.
Yeah.
And it's like the world according to Jeff Goldblum, or life according to Jeff Goldblum. And he talks about these different areas in life. And one of the episodes talked about shoes and how shoes have led to culture. But I also think gaming has led to that as well. Because I think about, one, like, NBA 2K has had Jay-Z produce an album solely for the game, and playlists and all sorts of things that are getting these pop culture icons and just getting so many things involved in these games. Like you even think of Fortnite, like they have partners. They've had partnerships with Marvel. They've had partnerships with Star Wars. Like gaming has become culture.
Yeah.
And is involved in no matter who you are. Like there is going to be some point in your life that gaming is a part of that.
Well, yeah, and we're seeing that more and more of a variety of games are coming out too. That gets a different audience every time. Like I'm a believer that there's at least one game for everybody.
Yeah.
Like everybody in this world, this is a very broad statement, but everybody in this world could find something that they're interested in games. And I think that to me is something that is really encouraging to see so many different people that never would have considered, buying a Nintendo Switch to play Animal Crossing,
Right.
or buying a PlayStation or whatever to play a specific game. We're starting to see more and more of that, and that's really encouraging to me because, I mean, people are having fun and they're enjoying their time, and connecting because of it.
Yeah, and like I said, like I want to dive deeper into this. I want to get more people into this conversation because I think that it'll be really cool to see what that conversation turns out to be. So in a future podcast, Robbie, I hope you'll join for that conversation again.
Absolutely.
Kind of moving forward, but we've kind of alluded to this, and I talked to this at the beginning, kind of in the opening of the episode. I do want to spend some time and use this platform to talk about everything that's taking place in the U.S. And I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this. And Robbie, feel free to chime in a little bit. But we are seeing a lot of movements. We're seeing a lot of people being passionate about what is happening in the U.S. and now all over the world. The Black Lives Matter movement, and it's been a movement for years, has really taken off. And I want to talk about kind of where my stance is and in this, because as a white individual, it is very disheartening to see my black friends and see those black lives being taken from them for doing nothing. From George Floyd to Breonna Taylor to Ahmaud Arbery, Tony McDade, Sean Reed, like these are individuals who have had their lives stripped from the corrupt systems that are in place in the U.S. and all over the world. I just started reading a book called Born a Crime by Trevor Noah, and he was born in South Africa, and a lot of the things that he talks about is what is exactly happening in the U.S. today. And it's disheartening. Like Robbie and I have had these conversations all week. We've been talking about what we can do to help, what we can do to move forward, especially as white individuals. I went to a protest earlier this week. I know, Robbie, you're going to one today. There's one tomorrow that I'm probably going to attend as well. But we, as individuals, need to come together to fight a corrupt system. And that starts with research. That starts with putting it on yourself to understand what is taking place, putting it on yourself to understand what is happening, why people are upset for what is taking place, and then doing something about it.
Yes.
I think is the next step. Because we can say all we want, the system is corrupt, everything that's happening sucks, but until we actually do something to affect change, we're not doing our due diligence. And I think about Blackout Tuesday that happened this week, where people who literally just posted a black square on Instagram or social media, but nothing else. That was their one form of speaking up about things. Like, that's not creating change. That's not doing anything. Right. And so I know that, Robbie, you and I have donated to multiple causes already throughout the week. We've talked about doing our research and talking about ways that we can actually take these steps forward. So I know that you have some ways too that you could probably talk about of how people can get involved and help in this time of crisis across, not only the U.S. but across the world.
Oh yeah, I mean, read something earlier. All 50 states have had some form of demonstration, and in addition to that, I think it's up to 18 countries other than the United States that are all protesting in some form. Which is, on one hand, it's really unfortunate that this is what it took
Mm-hmm.
for people to take a stand, right? On the other hand, I don't know, and I haven't done the research on this yet, but I don't know if that's ever happened where something has occurred or a series of things have occurred, and not only have all 50 states have had some sort of demonstration, but 18 other countries. Like, that's pretty big, right? I think, where I start, I think you hit the nail on the head. It starts with self work. Like, it is
Mm-hmm.
always, it has to be self work. I don't think, and I don't think any of us are exempt from this. When I say us, I specifically mean white people. Um, you have to do the self work before you can really help people.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you can donate. That is one way, right? Of without doing self work, just saying have my money, which is good. I think it's good to donate. I mean, it feels like every day I've been trying to find a new cause to give
Mm-hmm.
my money. Um, but the self work in research, the self work in talking to friends. You mentioned before that we've been talking about it all week. I mean, we've had a conversation every day
Mm-hmm.
for the last week at least about this stuff. Um, and I think it to me it comes down to having a responsibility. This is the first time you're speaking up about racism. What a privilege that is, right? That you
Mm-hmm.
have gone your whole life, not you, but people
Yeah.
have gone their whole lives without ever saying a word about it. And all of a sudden now they're saying, oh, they're waking up to it. They're waking up to, oh, this is a
Yep.
real thing, right? What a privilege that is to be able to do that. So I think it starts with the self work. I think the next step in acting, right, in trying to make sure that you are taking steps that are helpful and positive, is knowing who to connect to,
Mm-hmm.
knowing who you're listening to, and amplifying those voices. And I also think it has to come back to owning the mistakes that you're going to make.
Absolutely.
You know, I don't know any endeavor that I've ever participated in that I haven't made a mistake in. And so I think sometimes white folks, and myself included, like we err on the side of not saying anything at all because we don't want to say the right thing, we don't want to mess up, and we don't want to hurt people's feelings.
Mm-hmm.
But we risk a hell of a lot. Excuse my language.
Yeah, you're fine.
We risk a hell of a lot by not saying anything at all, and by not doing anything.
Mm-hmm.
We risk, like, people's lives are literally on the line, right? And be okay with messing up.
Mm-hmm.
It is going to happen. At some point, you're going to say the wrong thing. You're going to do the wrong thing. You're going to take the wrong action. If you can just be okay with messing up, I think you can go way farther because you're opening yourself up to opportunity.
Yeah, and as Robbie addresses his phone going off, um, life life is not a video game. Like,
No.
we don't respawn, as far as I know. So the way, like, some of these individuals are having such reckless actions, and sometimes I'm looking at this and I'm like, shit, this is turning into like Grand Theft Auto level. Like, it's crazy to think about, but like, we have police officers that are recklessly killing people, and we have people that are losing their lives for no reason. And it sucks because these are humans killing humans. Like, this is not a player taking out an NPC. Like, this is real life. And this is a longer episode because this is something that needs to be addressed. This is something that needs to be fundamentally changed in the US and across the world. And it's something that I like I said, I wanted to use this platform to speak on. And I'm going to put resources down below in the description, ways for you to be able to donate, books, ton of different things in the description of this, so that you can educate yourself and find ways for you to assist in everything that's taking place. Because I think that it's important to invest in those that are going to invest in us, but it is also important to invest in humans in general. And this is a tough time, in the midst of a pandemic and murder hornets and, the fires in Australia that happened earlier this year and everything else that's taking place.
Yep.
There's so much, and we need to support our neighbors. We need to support the people in our lives. And those that may not be in our lives that we just meet on the street, whether that's a protest or just going to a restaurant. Mm-hmm. We need to be invested in each other. And that's what I have learned throughout my life. That's what it keeps coming back to. Robbie, you talked on this earlier with relationships through gaming. That's why I brought up culture, because I think that as we continue to live and, go through each day, like finding something to invest in and finding people in our lives to invest in. Because at the end of the day, everybody needs support, whether they tell you or not. Like, no matter who you are as a person, you need support. And so with that kind of being said, I'm going to kind of go back off that. Like I said, I'm going to have resources and opportunities for donations and places to donate in the description below. But Robbie, as we kind of close out here, what are some things that you are working on right now? What are some things that, if there are any things that you want to promote? I know this is kind of a somber thing to say at the end of that conversation, but other things that you're working on, or final thoughts?
Well, yeah, I think, thank you for using your platform and being willing to talk about this stuff. It's really sometimes difficult stuff to talk about, but we have to be okay with talking about it. I think that the thing that I'll say is I'm not working on anything other than doing some of the work so that I can show up for racial justice. I think that for me it is a personal project for me. That's the one thing that I'm working on right now. Prior to the end of the academic year, I was working with a group on campus to work specifically with white men in anti-racism work and anti-racist attitudes and beliefs. And so I created a syllabus, but as I mentioned before, I'm leaving the current institution. So I'm going to be starting over at the new institution. And my main goal is going to be trying to work specifically with people in majority groups about a lot of this stuff. The other thing that I would say I'm working on and almost always constantly researching is men and masculinity. So I'll plug that really quickly. I've been trying to put together resources and presentations and toolkits for men specifically to talk about their experiences and ways in which we collectively and individually can work to make the world a safer place for everyone. And the reason why it's men specifically is because, without going into too much detail, men have been this majorly, is that a word? Majorly, they've been the group that have caused the most trauma to other groups, and white men specifically. So that's why I wanted to work in that sort of wheelhouse, because if I'm not, as a white man, if I'm not showing up in that space and being willing to, I would say, dismantle a lot of the systems, then I don't know who else is, and I'm not going to wait for someone else to do the work. So I'll say that. Yeah, I would say those are my final thoughts. Just keep putting one foot in front of the other. Find ways to connect with people. If it's gaming, that's awesome. Like, keep doing that, and find ways to do it outside of gaming too.
I appreciate that. Thank you for coming on. Like I said, definitely get you on in a future episode. If anybody has made it this far into the video and is interested in having any of those conversations with Robbie, I know that he's always welcome to have those conversations. You can find his social media link down below, or his @ I'm pretty sure that's his @ for all of his social media. Feel free to shoot him a DM, shoot him a message. I know that he's always willing to have those conversations, and same for myself. So thank you all for tuning in to this episode. Click the like, share, subscribe, comment down below if you feel inclined to do so. We will be back next week with level 4, where we'll be talking a little bit more about my journey in gaming and a little bit more about my backstory of it. So, Robbie, thank you again for joining us. Thank you all for listening and tuning in, and we will see you next week. Please stay safe, stay healthy, and as always, make sure that you're leveling up. See you next time.